So now that we've had a chance to talk a little bit about things being opposite, and just always remember, it's not about the evil hand and the good hand, it's the right and the left. It's simply an opposite. And so we have income and expenses as an opposite. That's 1. Asset and liabilities, that's 2. Buy, borrow, 3. Own, owe, 4. Up, down, right? 5, 6. All of these opposites are here. So let's keep that in mind. Now let's shift, and I'm going to freehand this one as well, just because it feels so right to do it this way rather than in the PowerPoint, is we're going to talk about the order of a transaction. And I'll try to spell right. That's always a risk when you're working with me. Is the order of transactions. It's plural. Okay. So what people normally think of is buy low and sell high. And the problem with that notion is, let's say we have something at $100 and let's say we have something at $200. And, looking at it from a up and down standpoint, right? In amount on this axis, we want to buy low and sell high. Well, what we have here is we have the element of time, and time moves this way, moves forward. So generally what happens is we buy something, let's say on this day at $100, and let's say down here on this day we decide to sell at $200. So let's write that in here. Let's write down the word buy at this price, and let's write down the word sell at this price, and this is the time that elapsed. So if we look at the order of the transaction, in this case, we bought first and we sell second. And I should probably put that in green just to match. Let's do that. We buy first and we sell second, right? So let's go sell. What color did we do our sell in? Blue. We sell second. And that's very easy to understand because we do it all the time, and we're very, very interested in this time element, right? We're very interested here because that's what we experience, okay? Let's draw a line over here and let's talk about the opposite of what would happen. Can we change the direction of time? We cannot. Time is the one thing we can't do the opposite arrow and go back this way, right? If we did though, if we could reverse it and go opposite, which would you want to do first on the opposite here? Well, if time were moving backwards, we'd want to sell and then we'd want to buy. Isn't that right? We'd want to sell at a high price because we always want to buy and sell. So watch this. This is really interesting. Most people want to buy low and sell high. That's always what we want to do. That's how we're going to make some money in whatever we do, right? And time is against us. Time is running the same way, okay? Well, this works if the direction is up. So direction over here, direction is up. See? Up. Up. See that? But what if the direction is down? What if something is at $200 and it falls down to $100? Well, we can't change the direction. We don't have any power over that, right? It's still going to look like this. That's what the graph will look like in the future. So we can't change the direction. So the direction now is going to be down. Now this is really interesting because if we look at the 4 pillars of investing, sometimes we're going to do a fundamental analysis and a technical analysis and believe it's going to go up based on those numbers. It could always change. Other times we're going to look at the 4 pillars of investing, fundamental analysis, technical analysis, first 2 pillars. We're going to say, well, actually down would probably be the likely case. And we've seen so far in our course when we look, let's go back and look at a couple. We looked at Blockbuster Video. And when we looked at their financial statement, we really felt they were in trouble. GameStop, we thought they were in trouble. And yet Netflix, we thought, looked like it was going to do pretty well, right? And that Fortnite was on the uptrend. That's probably got some obsolescence risk to it, but nonetheless, that's where we are, right? So when we get to the third pillar of turning that into cash flow, it's pretty simple to do what we just did by going with a long position, right? Just saying, look, I'm going to own this and I'm going to let it go up and make me money, right? Very simple to do. But how do we make money when something's going down? Well, we're going to have to do the opposite of something. Well, we cannot change the direction of the time, and we cannot change the direction of the stock. So the only thing we can change is the order we make the transaction in. And so so this is something we can change. We can actually, now just hold this thought with me before, some people want to go a little crazy here. Just relax it. What if we did this? What if, say, we'll sell first and we'll change this order and we'll buy second. Okay, let's do that. Let's buy second. People love this section. It's like, what? How? So wait a minute. We're going to try to do this. We're going to try to sell at 200 just like we did here. Here we sold at 200. We want to do that again. We want to sell at the same price. And then we want to buy down here at 100 and buy it back. Now, that's a mind blower for people to say, well, you can't do that because you can't sell something until you bought it. Again, they get locked in this mentality that they have to buy first and sell second, okay? Well, that's true. There's some truth to that. I can understand that rationale that it'd be tough. Well, this has a lot to do with a short position. So we'll just go long and short. This is what a short position might look like. Well, how are you able to do this? And it sounds so strange that some people say this has to be fraudulent, right? It's not fraudulent at all. Nothing to it. As a matter of fact, we're going to find an area in your life where there's probably a better than 50% chance, I would say, that you've done this before and not even known it. I'll bet by the end of this thing, there'll be a moment as I take you through different examples that I think the one that we do, the very last one, you'll say, wait a minute, I've already done that before. And I didn't even know I was in a short position, and I did it. And I did it without even knowing what I was doing. So we're changing the order of transaction. We can't change the direction because if the fundamentals say it's going down, the trend's going down, we don't have any control of this. Can't change time. Can't change the fact that we have to buy low and sell high to make money. None of those we can change. So if we have an opposite direction, something's got to flip. And so what we're going to do is we're going to flip the order of the transaction. We're going to sell first here and buy back second here. So let's take a picture of that chart and expand on that idea. That's a pretty good looking chart as well. I'll tell you what, the PowerPoint has its value for sure. The Keynote does. But I'll tell you, and I'm no artist, we know that, but I'll tell you what, if I can say so myself, you and we're coming up with some pretty good looking charts right here. So let's take these ideas and let's put them together. Okay, let's put these two ideas together. We'll teach the concept and then we'll do example after example after example after example. How many is that? Example after example after example after. That's 4 examples I owe you now that I just promised. So yeah, we'll do 4 examples. So let's put these together, right? There's 2 ways to possess something. Okay, there's 2 ways I can possess something. So in order to sell something, you must first get what? Possession of it. You have to have it in your hands. Now, possession is ownership is 2 different things. Okay, possession and ownership is 2 different things. For example, I have person number 1, and he has, let's magically bring in some money. He's got $100 in his hand, right there. See how magic that was? And I have person number 2, and he has money in his hands. And both of them can do what we call trade. And another word for transaction is trade. That's another word for transactions. So let's pause from these people for a moment and let's just talk about trade. Another word for trade is exchange. And we're going to play with our mind a little bit here and have some fun. What is a trade? What is an exchange? What is a transaction? Well, because we use cash or currency as a medium exchange, we tend to look at that as the baseline. But what if we went back to just plain old trade? What if these two people, instead of having $100 each, what if this guy was a pig farmer? Is that a pig? He's not very happy. He knows what's going to happen to him. And because he has a pig farm, he has 3 strips of bacon. And this guy over here, he's got a, look at this, he's got a chicken. Is that a chicken? I don't know if I'd like that chicken. He has 3 eggs. Looks like this chicken's going to be a little happier than the pig. And they decide to make an exchange or a trade or a transaction where they can have breakfast together because they trade the bacon for the eggs, or they trade the eggs for the bacon. Now, let me ask you a question over here. Here's the question. Who was the buyer over here? And who was the seller? There's a great question to think about for a minute. Who is the buyer and who is the seller in this transaction? It's a little tougher to do when you're not dealing with currency and you're just in good old-fashioned trade, isn't that right? Back in the old days, before we started printing all this money, giving us all these headaches, man, we could just trade straight across, you know, like lunchtime. Hey, you know, hey, dude, I'll trade you that Oreo for my Twinkies. What do you think? I'm tired of Twinkies every day. Well, I'm tired of Oreos every day. Okay, let's trade. I'll give you the Twinkies for my Oreo. Who is the buyer and who is the seller? So we can get a little bit crazy here with these words buy and sell and buy and sell. I much prefer the term trade or exchange. We have a New York Stock Exchange. We have a Chicago Board of Trade. I'm not a stock buyer or a stock seller. I'm a stock trader. What do? I trade futures. I trade commodities. I just trade stuff back and forth. I find something I don't want and trade it for I want. So maybe we could say that this guy here was a seller of bacon, but at the same time, he was also a buyer of eggs, right? And over here, we can say this guy is a seller of eggs, if I can spell eggs right, but he was also a what? A buyer. Oh, it looks like I'm here recording my home office day, and we have some very friendly kids. Let's pause this. I apologize. A private lane, and it's just a beautiful afternoon, and I had the window open, and we had some visitors that we don't usually have drop by. So hopefully that's a little quieter. Let's continue our lesson. So who is the buyer and who is the seller? Well, this guy sold bacon and bought eggs, and this guy bought bacon and sold eggs, right? He was a seller of eggs, but he was a buyer of bacon, if I can write that semi-neatly. Buyer of bacon right here. So think about both these guys now with money. This guy they both might go out and let's say they want to buy, let's say they want to buy a house, okay? And they both buy a house, let's say. Well, this guy was a buyer of a house, but he was also a seller of currency. And so is this guy, okay? They're both buying their own houses right here. See this? And the buyer of the house and the seller of currency. This guy was the same. He was a buyer of a house, and he was a seller of currency. And so what's interesting is we generally say, hey, you bought a house? That's how you usually think about it, right? Hey, you bought a house? what if I didn't think about it that way? What if I said, oh, so you sold some currency? Isn't that true? Couldn't I just say it that way? If I go back and I look at the difference here, I could say, oh, so you bought some bacon. Or I can say, oh, so you sold your eggs today. Or, oh, you sold your bacon today. What'd you buy, some eggs? Well, I could just as easily say, oh, you sold your currency today. What'd you buy, a house? Oh, you bought a house. What'd you sell for it? What'd you trade for that? You trade some money for it? Or did you trade work? Or did you trade time? Or did you trade commodities? Or did you trade it for stocks? Or did you have some gold you traded for it? What did you sell to buy the house? Did you sell some gold? Or did you sell your currency? You follow that? So to make a transaction, this guy had to have some bacon, and this guy had to have some eggs in his possession. In order to make this trade for house, this guy had to have some currency in his possession, right? And this guy had to have currency in his possession to make these trades. So think about this. Here's the question on this side. Where did he get the currency to sell for the house? In fact, we'll ask this guy the same thing. Where did he or she, we'll call it a she, right? She's happy, okay, maybe longer hair. Where did she get the currency to sell her currency? Where did they get this to make the trade from? So let's review. We've talked about a lot here. We've said, look, we're looking at the order of transactions. When you sell and when you buy. We said, well, slow down. What does buying and selling really mean? Well, you're selling something you're getting rid of, and you're buying something you're gaining. So here they're getting rid of currency and they're gaining a home, both of them. So I'm going to ask this guy here, this happy little man right here. I said, hey, happy little man, where did you get this money to buy your house? And he says, well, Andy, I'll tell you where I got this money. I saved it. It's my money. I saved it. That's where I got it. And so I can make this transaction. I said, okay, well, you can do that. So he had some money that he owned over here, right? He had some money over here that he owned, and he just traded it for a house. So he out went the money, and in came the house. Make sense? Fantastic. You saved it. So he did it with something that he owned. That's how he made this sell. He sold because of what he owned. Well, then I come over here and I say, fine young lady, how did you get this money to trade for this house? She says, I didn't. I just young. I haven't gotten any money yet. So what I did is I borrowed it. I borrowed that money, and then I traded it for this house. So I go, do you owe anything over here? Do you owe anything for this transaction? He said, no, I don't owe anything for this. No, I don't. I said, so, you made this trade, you sold this money away. How in the world can you borrow something that's not yours and then trade it? Let me say that again. How in the world could you borrow something that isn't yours? In other words, this money isn't yours. It's just in your possession. You have it in your hand, but it's not really yours. It's the bank's. They're just loaning it to you. Well, that doesn't matter, she says. People do it all the time. So I'm saying, wait a minute. You can borrow something that's not even yours, and then you can use that to make a second transaction? And she goes, yeah, it's no problem. So you owe the bank some money. And she says, yeah, I owe the bank some money and all this. So I just use $100 for an example. Maybe this represents 100 times 1,000 for $100,000, right, for both of them. Maybe that's what the number is. They each have a $100,000 house. So the only difference between the man and the woman here is the man saved the money to buy the house, and that's how he came up with the currency to sell, and she borrowed the money to sell. Now, I'll say, well, how long did it take you to save up this $100,000? And he says, I've been saving for 10 years. I've saved $10,000 a year for 10 years. I say, how long did it take this loan to close? And she says, 10 days to get that done. And I go, well, this sounds better. She goes, well, there's a catch. I do owe them the money. And so that's really interesting to think about, isn't it? That a transaction can be a buy or it can be a sell depending on what you're getting rid of or what you're gaining. I think you'll find this really interesting. What happens if we track the order of transaction for her with the currency that she sold? Well, what she did is she's probably going to sell this currency first. But in order to do it, she had to borrow first, right? So she borrowed the money from the bank and then she traded it for a house. Again, it's a little bit difficult because we're going to talk in terms of opposite here, right? She didn't buy the house, in our view, so much as she sold her currency. He didn't buy the house so much as he sold the currency. He didn't buy the eggs so much as he sold his bacon. He didn't sell the eggs so much as he bought the bacon. You see that? So every transaction you make, you're actually a buyer and a seller. We just tend to have so much currency floating around that we focus on what was gained rather than what was lost. Here he gained eggs and lost bacon. Here he gained egg and lost bacon. Here he lost eggs and gained bacon. Here this man gained a house and lost cash. Here this woman gained a house and also lost cash. The difference is the cash that she traded was borrowed and the cash that he traded was saved. So one of them got the source of cash from here. In fact, let's take pictures of this so we can kind of clean it up a little bit. And you can see why I didn't want to build slides on this, because the order really matters. So we can remove these right here now, and we can bring this back, I hope, and have it. And there it is. Now we can draw things on it and make it even better than it was, right? Let's make it a little smaller, perhaps, like that. And we can really start to understand this very, very well. That the order that she's going to do is very simple, okay? The order he did is she borrowed. Let's look at her order, okay, real quick. Let's just focus on her. Let's say that she first borrowed the money, right? Then too, she traded the money for a house. And we might just say sell the money, right? She sold her money and bought a house. And you know what? Maybe she's a house flipper. Maybe she's one of these people that are better at this than I would be. Maybe she's one of these people that speculate and buy the house low and sell high. You know, my friend Than Merrill, he's done over $1 billion of transactions. And many of those have just been buying a house low, fixing it up, and selling it high. Now, you know, Kenny would never do that. He says, I don't want cash flow. And Dan says, well, you know, you're good at cash flow. I'm pretty good at cash flow, but I'm also good at buying low and selling high. And both of them done billions of dollars in transactions. And, you know, both of them have successful lives and successful wives and successful kids. And, you know, they're both happy. So whether you want to, you know, cash flow it with rent or you want to buy low and sell high is up to you. But let's say that's what she wants to do. She wants to buy low and sell high. And 3, maybe she trades it back, right? Watch this. Maybe she trades it back. So let's put a little 3 right here. If I can get my 3 going. There we go. Maybe she trades back. In other words, she sells the house to buy back the money. But the money maybe is worth less than it was before, which means the house is going to be worth more. And then she returns the money to the bank that she borrowed. And so she sells when the money's worth a lot and can buy a lot of house. And then she buys back when the money's worth a little. So think about this. She sold first and she bought second. And that's how she did it. And the way she was able to sell first is because she what? She borrowed. Now that's a headful. That's a handful and a headful. But if we look at these 4 ideas and we're going to write them down, that is how you're able to change the order of your transaction. Is borrow something like some cash, sell it for something else like a house, or the word I like is trade. And in this case, she got rid of the thing she borrowed. So whatever you borrow, you get rid of. Whatever you borrow, you get rid of. People say, how can you sell something that doesn't belong to you? It happens every second of every day in real estate. People borrow money from the bank and it's not theirs, and then they trade it. So think of it this way. Get out of finance. Let's say you borrowed a cup of sugar from your neighbor, and then you went to a different neighbor and traded it for some salt, right? And that could happen. Maybe you go to your neighbor and say, hey, I've got some nutmeg. I'll trade you for some salt. And the guy says, well, I don't need any nutmeg, so I need sugar. Well, you don't have any sugar. So what do? You go to your other neighbor. You say, hey, can I borrow a cup of sugar? And he says, sure. And then you go take your sugar and then you trade it for the salt, right? And then when you get the salt back, you give it back to your neighbor, right? And then you go back and make yourself whole and return your sugar. It's not that tough to do, right? So you borrow to make a trade, and then you trade back, and you do that. Think about that for a minute. You borrow a cup of sugar. You trade it for a jar of salt. You go use the salt to bake cookies, and you sell your cookies, and then you buy some sugar, and then you return what you borrowed. You can absolutely get away with that. Borrow, sell, trade back, return. Borrow, sell, trade back, return. So watch this segment as many times as you need to grasp these concepts. And I'm going to say it again. I said, as we go through this, you're going to feel like you're getting a financial education, because you are. Are you feeling it? Are you feeling yourself getting insight and seeing the world in a little bit different view, yet a more clear view? Here are the steps to shorting a short position. Okay, number one is borrow. Let's see if I can get the R right in that. Borrow. We got to write that better than that. I got so much chicken scratch. We got to do it right for our student. Okay, borrow is number one. Okay, number two is trade. Okay, or in other words, sell away what you borrowed. Sell what was borrowed. Trade it away. Sell what was borrowed. Okay, number three, trade back. Trade back. In other words, get back what you borrowed. Somehow, get it back. Get back what was borrowed. And then number four, return. This would be one form of a short position. There's other ways you can do it, by the way, but we'll just say this is a basic one. This is one of many. There's other ways to do it, no question, but they're all going to follow the same idea pretty much. This is a basic short position. So you can see why the long position was pretty easy, because you buy low, sell high. You buy it, you own it, goes up, you sell it. People do that every day, but shorting is the opposite of what people are used to doing. Everything's opposite. It's going down instead of up. You're buying or you're selling first instead of buying second. So there's a lot of oppositeness in here, right here. Okay, buy low, sell high, got it. Buy first, sell second, got it. Okay, wait a minute. Sell first, let it drop and buy low, huh? How do I do that? You do it with this formula right here, right there. So that's the formula that we're going to use. We're going to write that 1,000 million different times. And it wouldn't be bad for you to write this stuff down in your notes, and just writing it out is better than just looking at a PDF. A lot of times we just, for the sake of speed, we have you download a PDF and you watch it. But taking a piece of paper, as I did, and my challenge to you is to take some time and teach this to someone else. Because once you can teach it to someone else, then I know you've got it. So find a niece or nephew. I started teaching this to my sons when they're probably 11. I have a 13-year-old now, and he gets it, and pretty easy for him to get because we taught him young, and he hasn't been tainted by the world yet to think just one way. It's very easy for him to not judge either way. In fact, a person that has never dealt with money before would see and didn't have any prejudgments would see these as equals. owning something that goes up, borrowing stuff that goes down, they wouldn't even have, they would pass no judgment on either one because the result was the same. They'd see the same benefit. But for some reason, when we get our context, we're ingrained and we think one way, this opportunity escapes people. So let's do a quick review and then we'll begin with our examples. Lesson number 1 was about opposites, right? Buy, sell, up, down, own, owe, asset, liability, income, expense. And we just knew that if we own something and it goes up $1, we got $1 richer. If we borrow something that goes down $1, we just got $1 richer, right? Why is that? Well, because when we pay it back, we're paying back at $1 less than we borrowed. We're giving back less than we obtained. Get that? If I borrow $100 and somehow that gets to 90, somehow without me paying it off, it gets to 90, and I pay back, I keep that extra $10, right? So think of it that way. I can either, start with 90 and then with 100, or start with 100 and pay back 90. Either way, I make $10. And so practice it. Think about it. Wrap your mind around it. If you're struggling, write our team an email. Say, I just need some help. If you are in our coaching program, now you get live one-on-one help, and you can ask right then and there and questions and all this stuff. But that's the first concept. Second concept was the order of the transaction. Buy first, sell second, or sell first, buy second, which leads us to how in the world do you sell first and buy second? Well, what is a buy and sell transaction, right? This guy sold first, right? He sold his bacon, right? He sold his bacon. This guy sold first. He sold his eggs. It's just a transaction. So what is a buyer and what is a seller, right? Who is the buyer and who is the seller? Well, we're both in every transaction we make. We are both a buyer and a seller every time. It's the object in question that decides. If I say house, you're a buyer. If I say cash, you're a seller. If I say cash, you're a seller. If I say house, you're a buyer. So whatever you have possession of, if it's leaving you, you're selling it. And if it's coming to you, you're gaining it. You're buying it if it comes to you. You're selling it if you're getting rid of it in a trade. So you are a buyer and a seller in every transaction you make. You might say, yeah, I just bought 50 shares of Amazon, and that would be true. Or you might just say, I just traded away, X amount of cash, and that could be true too. So you can say I'm a seller of cash and a buyer of stock. Or you could say I'm a seller of stock and a buyer of gold if that was your trade. So understanding trade is important. And when we think of it that way, it makes this stuff a lot easier. So we found that we can sell first if we borrow the thing. So she borrowed it and sold it in exchange for a house. She borrowed the money, sold her money, and bought a house, which allows you to sell first and begin to selling. Okay. So we'll be back and we're going to hop into some examples. Great job sticking with this. I think you might be beginning to understand why this is one of the favorite sections of the 4 Pillars class.